live view. You cannot talk about 5 of the jewels of wisdom without talking about the last 2. And that will Ella do in about who am I.
Goedemiddag allemaal.
Good afternoon. Hope that everything went well in your workshops and that it offered you what you were looking for. Building on your life vision is a proactive life attitude. In the esoteric philosophy, this life attitude is based on one endless principle. It means that everything is an expression of the one and boundless life. This thought is the foundation of all great religions that are one in essence. Therefore, the ethics in all of them is the same. The same is taught to us by the Advaita Vedanta, a philosophical school from the Hinduism, in the 3 words Tat Tvam Asi, or you are that. That, seen as the boundlessness, you can never be outside the boundlessness, because you are the boundlessness in essence. So in reality, we are the oneness, that, even though we see ourselves as seemingly separate parts. Like the ocean that expresses itself in waves, streams, drops of water, in the same way the ocean of all the encompassing life or the universe expresses itself in the countless beings or consciousnesses. If we want to understand the universe, then we should try to understand ourselves, because we are a copy of the universe. The universe repeats itself in each of its building blocks. You may know the proverb that was inscribed above the temple of Apollo in Delphi: "Man, know thyself." In just a few words, this proverb expresses the meaning of going the inward path, a path of consciousness that people follow who expand their consciousness in order to raise the personal to the above personal. Thyself is the one self that is identical in all beings, the self in which we do not differ from one another. It is the heart of the universe, that we are all in the deepest of our being. So if you know yourself in your deepest being, you know the whole universe, both inward and outward. Not just because you're part of it, but because in the heart of your being, you are the universe. As we indicated in the announcement of the symposium, our society needs a clear vision of life, because the multiple and often contrary opinions and ideas clearly show that we lack a generally accepted vision that can serve as a guideline in our lives and as a foundation to organize our society. The philosophy of life that we present to you consists of 3 fundamental propositions and their elaboration in 7 jewels of wisdom. These treasures of wisdom are reliable guides for your thoughts and acts, because they describe the patterns of behavior of the universe. The more insight we develop in these fundamental principles, the more we will recognize of the inner and the outer structure of the universe. Every jewel in itself is a key to wisdom, but together they form one whole. They are interwoven. One jewel explains and is a continuation of the other. When we ask ourselves, who am I? And what is the purpose of life? we found the answers in the 7 jewels of wisdom.
Man is, as we have seen, composed of spirit, soul and body. When the soul manages to unite itself with the imperishable spirit, then this human being becomes immortal, meaning that his consciousness expands without interruption. In order to reach this condition, it is necessary that we learn to focus more and more on our higher nature, which is one with the source of our consciousness. Instead of occupying ourselves with the illusions of daily existence, it would be better to continuously keep our higher self in the back of our minds. Then our will and desire will naturally tend to keep our thoughts focused on the higher self. By practicing this, the influence of the higher self increases and becomes clearer and more powerful with every thought we think. Knowledge and energy will flow from this. We become more and more conscious of the background of things. The more we learn to rise above personal thinking and selfishness increases, the more we develop an understanding eye for the development of all things. What are the consequences for your daily life if you try to live from your higher self? You will want to develop spiritually. You do not focus anymore on the illusions of this outer life, but the question is still, why would you want to do that? Well, there are 2 choices for continuing our development, 2 paths. One path is called the path of each for himself. This is the path that leads to liberation for yourself only. The other path you can choose is called the path of immortality. One chooses this path in order to serve the whole. One stays in the world to inspire and to help wherever possible. We have, in fact, there is no need to choose anymore, because your own being, with your whole being, you understand the unity. We've already progressed quite a bit in our spiritual development, but we are not there yet. Let's first see, using the 7 jewels of wisdom, where we stand now. During the many phases of our progressive evolution, the 5th jewel, we gradually woke up our inner powers and lived our lives for better and for worse. In this way, we developed ourselves to become the thinkers we are now. But we are still imperfect thinkers. Through self-directed evolution, we can learn to become perfect thinkers. We carry in us all the capacities that are needed, and it is in the order of nature to develop these. We have developed ourselves into what we are now. That is what we learn from Jewel 4, self-becoming. But we can become even more ourselves, our higher self. Our urge to develop originates in ourselves. Thus, we create more and more our own unique self. Self-becoming leads time and again to a certain position on the ladder of life. The ladder of life is in fact hierarchical nature, in which everything is related and cooperates together. Jewel 3, the doctrine of the hierarchies, indicates that every being has its unique place on the ladder of life, of consciousness. That place is determined by the level of consciousness that one has reached through the succeeding lives as a result of the law of cause and effect.
The doctrine of hierarchies means that everything is related to everything, that we are mutually dependent on each other, and therefore we all carry responsibility for the whole. In this light, I would like to read you an experience of a group of journalists. They were thinking about the term dependence. This is one of the remarks that were made, and I quote, "What we slowly started to notice was that seeing dependence and mutual connectedness changes your outlook on the world and the way you stand in life. Once you have seen that, you'll always see it. There is no more choice. Much more often, you feel invited to take responsibility. The greatest promise is that we can, through practice, succeed in holding on to that outlook. Then, our understanding of dependence becomes somewhat like the doctrine of evolution. It is in fact all the time as a determining power, and your understanding of the world and your influence on it increases if you declare yourself dependent." End quote. It seems that in today's people's minds, the connectedness of all that exists is being realized more and more. And that gives hopes for the future.
How we reach this position on the ladder of life is explained by Jewel 2, karma. We are our own karma and consequently have control over our own life. So we also determine our future. We cannot escape our responsibility for our own fate destiny, but we are able to solve our problems in the course of time. So the question is, how do we deal with the things that happen to us now? Here lie our chances to act in an ethical way. We can start immediately doing that. We can start in the small, in our daily life, within our family, with the neighbors, at work, with our colleagues, etc. Now, karma cannot be understood without the first jewel, reincarnation. These form a twin teaching, so to say. The energy that you put in the refining of your character will remain after your death, in contrast to the energy you put in transient matters. This improvement of character you take with you to a next life in order to continue it, to penetrate ever deeper in the secrets of human nature. You become what you think. Death loses its frightful influence because we know that life simply goes on, albeit in a state of rest we call death. And each succeeding life is a new chance to grow in consciousness. These were, in a nutshell, 5 of the 7 jewels. They show us the inner path. By the processes described in these 5 jewels, we are able to develop the boundless capacities that lie latent in us. So, now we know that we are the boundlessness and that we have the 5 jewels to our disposal that enable us to find an explanation for whichever problem of life and to draw our conclusions from it. But what do we choose now? You might call inner growth the purpose of life, but we have not yet spoken about the motive behind this growth. For with what motive do you want to grow?
The 6th jewel, the 2 paths, speaks about the motive, about the goal we have while passing through this growth. Both paths lead to heights of spiritual splendor. But do we want splendor only for ourselves, or for the totality? If you want to achieve enlightenment for yourself and liberate yourself from this world, then you go the path for each for himself. This path will lead to personal rest, perfect peace, happiness, and a life in the divine sphere. Sure, you perform acts of compassion. You practice unselfishness, but with a very subtle, selfish aim. Looking forward to your goal to enter that heavenly condition, you do everything to be able, finally, to rise above all worldly problems. This means that you break all ties with the world. Your goal has been achieved, and for you, it was all that was about. This explains the name Path Each for Himself, an effect that runs counter to the unity of life. If, however, you do not accept any liberation only for yourself, but dedicate your life to the service of everything that is, then you will stay in the world, although you have already outgrown it. For you cannot learn anything new here anymore. You renounce that heavenly state and keep taking responsibility to all those whose consciousness is less developed than yours. You show them the way out of the problems of this outer life that often have to do with selfishness. This is the path of immortality, the divine path.
Without the intention to reach a certain goal, but for the sake of compassion. Not for your own benefit, but only for the benefit of the general welfare. You make yourself subordinate to the general welfare, in the service of the greater whole of which you are a part. On this path, spiritual growth is not a motive, but a secondary effect. You see, this choice involves moral consequences. Already now we can choose for one of the two paths. This choice lies in fact in everything we do. Take, for instance, this example from daily life. Your evening is still unoccupied and you wish to spend these hours for an in-depth study of the Theosophica. Then the phone rings. You see that the caller is someone with a lot of problems. What do you do? Do you ignore the phone or do you answer the call? If you ignore it, to continue your studies in a theosophical book, you may be spiritually busy. But you do not act compassionately. Or do you take the call and set aside your own spiritual growth to help someone with his problems? Let us assume that you or I want to follow this path of compassion. Then we would live much more according to that above personal ideal that Patricia has sketched before. If we keep our above personal ideal active at the background of our actions, we will progressively become one with it. We will start to realize its deeper aspects by practicing it in daily life, and we will act accordingly. It does not matter on which level of consciousness we are now. Whether you are spiritually developed or not, everyone can always choose for compassion in all modesty and with all our limitations.
There's a great need of people that express this spiritual vision in their lives, or at least try to realize it. For only then they will be really serving the world. The best way to reach this is cooperation of corresponding thinkers. We are never on our own. There's always the inspiration of the teachers of humanity and of the teachers within us. And furthermore, there are many spiritual thinkers who are in tune with each other. having the same ideal in mind.
Samenwerking met overeenkomstige denkers
This cooperation of attuned thinkers means that all work for the same goal.
de kracht van meerderen is altijd groter
The
dan
power
de
of a group
individuele
is
kracht.
always greater
De
than an
uitstraling
individual
van zo'n
force.
groep denkers
The radiating influence of such a group of thinkers will attract many other people, who will add their forces.
We zien dat in de natuur terug.
We recognize this fact in nature. Take for instance the social instructor of a bee colony. One single bee cannot achieve much on his own, but together with her colleagues she accomplishes a lot.
Als mensen willen samenwerken om het ideaal
If people want to cooperate in order to develop and extend their ideal image of brotherhood, other people will join. In this way, the beneficial influence on humanity will continually expand.
Wat is de zin van dat mens zijn in het grenzeloos?
What is the purpose of being a human in the boundlessness? Maybe you would conclude from the first 5 jewels that the purpose of life is spiritual growth.
Maar als je de laatste 2 juwelen erbij betrekt,
But if you include the last 2 jewels too, the purpose is
gaat het alleen
compassion.
om de eenheid van het leven.
Then everything is based on the unity of life, and in unity, individual growth does not exist.